It carried news that was important to the African American community.
He used the newspaper as a bullhorn for justice.
The Carolina Times was also a voice for people.
In the early 1900s, Durham's black community was thriving as a center for black innovation and entrepreneurship.
You had a certain black intellectual community within Durham that you might not have found in some other communities. Durham was a community where you did have a black middle class. You had black businesses, and it was very vibrant in that regard.
Among them was the Carolina Times, a black-owned newspaper that was launched in 1926 and then purchased the next year by its most famous editor and publisher, Lewis Austin.
He used it as to fight for rights of African Americans from the late 1920s through 1971 when he died. It's been a leading force in the struggle for civil rights and black freedom in Durham as well as North Carolina for many years.
It came every week. I knew about it because my mother was a part of a lot of civic clubs and the Lyon Park Rose Garden Club, and they all put an article every month when they met in the paper. It was like routine.
As a newspaper boy, what I would do is just walk around the neighborhood, and there were certain people I knew that would buy that paper.
The paper developed a reputation for its honest and tough journalistic style, while Lewis Austin penned hard-hitting editorials against Jim Crow and its rigid system of anti-black laws.
One of the purposes of black newspapers, certainly through the Jim Crow era and even after, was to cover essentially what the white press would not.
The Carolina Times was also a voice for the black community. It was a place where they could challenge what was happening in Durham without fear of someone editing it out. And I think that it's a way in which the community also fed itself when no one else would do it.
If you read the editorials, you will see that Austin was incredibly outspoken, and he spared no words in attacking someone who he felt had done wrong in the struggle for justice, whether they were white or black. Austin called Senator Josiah Bailey a jackass in the press. The slogan of the paper was "The truth unbridled," and you know, he saw it. He put it in the paper as he saw it.
As the civil rights movement evolved, the Carolina Times played a key role in Durham's movement toward racial equality, specifically in the fight to desegregate the city's public schools.
Joycelyn McKissick, who is the oldest daughter of Floyd McKissick Sr., the sister of Floyd McKissick Jr., she was one of the first African Americans to desegregate Durham High School, which was the all-white high school in Durham. And she was certainly backed by Lewis Austin and the Carolina Times. In fact, while she was going through that, she wrote a column called Max Quacks, kind of play on her last name, McKissick.
Amid the civil rights movement, Durham's largest African American community was confronted with a challenge to its very existence. Beginning in 1962 and continuing through the next decade, the construction of North Carolina Highway 147 would rip through the African American community of Hayti. Lewis Austin's Carolina Times was in its path, yet he and his daughter Vivian refused to sell to the Urban Renewal Commission.
And they held out into the late 1970s, and then in 1979, the Carolina Times building was set fire to and burned to the ground. And she felt that it may have been, you know, arson and done by people who wanted to destroy the Carolina Times.
Yet the Carolina Times survived, and decades later, in an uncertain time for newspapers everywhere, it is still publishing.
It does not have the prominence that it once did. I think people recognize it for its historical role and for all that it did during the civil rights era and beyond.
Sometimes in this discussion of the long black freedom struggle or the long civil rights movement, people have not focused too much on black media, on black newspapers, especially in the South. And I think the Carolina Times is a prime example of that.
I'm proud of the Carolina Times still being in existence today because those little stories that would probably be insignificant to another media, they aren't here.